So one good way to think about organizing comes from Jane McAlevey in her book No Shortcuts, and she has an advocacy versus mobilizing versus organizing strategy, um, and advocacy and mobilizing are directed at people who support your cause. Organizing is a strategic plan to win those over who don't agree, right? And I think it's important to say, right, we're going to divide these into these 3 points. We're going to talk about them kind of like three different steps or different areas of operations, but we don't necessarily, just because we want to be organizing doesn't mean we don't ever advocate or mobilize, right? We just need to be honest about ourselves with what we're doing at any given time, right? Is this really organizing or is it advocacy? If it's advocacy, there's not necessarily a problem with that as long as we're not only doing advocacy, as long as we're not misleading ourselves by saying that the mobilizing we're doing is organizing. So we're splitting these up more so we can think about the work we do, who it's targeted at and what its outcome is, and not so much to say, don't do these other two, right? Because they're all different tools in our toolbox. So advocacy is supporting others, such as the union or an organization, to create social change on your behalf. Based on the belief that an elite can influence the current system on behalf of the people, yet it generally does not involve ordinary people or action and leadership, right? And so this is when, you donate to this, whatever not-for-profit that supports what, an issue that you find important. You donate to Planned Parenthood and you hope that they're going to use that money to protect reproductive rights, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? And there's nothing wrong with being an advocacy organization at times where your membership and your supporters put faith in you to do, to lead the change. But again, this is, we're talking about grassroots organizing, and advocacy is handing off, your agency. It's handing off your ability to make change to someone else. So we need to keep that in mind with what we're doing, right? Are we actually building the Green Party? Are we actually building an independent socialist organization, or are we handing off our power to someone else to wield however they want, right? And that's how we get betrayed in back rooms by deals between industry and special interests. The next one is mobilizing. And most people have been involved in mobilizing in some way: protests, rallies, attending, speaking at city council meetings, inward base building oriented work, right? It's limited to those who support your cause or the issue, which often results in an informal hierarchy being formed that still leaves out a lot of people, right? So even in mobilizing, there's always that core group of organizers that puts together the protest, right? That decides the scope, that picks the speakers, the location, the targets, all of that kind of thing. And again, it's all about your people, right? Who agrees with us on this issue? Let's get them in the streets. And that, again, that's not a bad thing. The more people we can get in the streets to apply public pressure and in strategic ways, the better. But sometimes when we're doing this, we need to ask ourselves, where is this leading to? Right? We're building up all this energy in our mobilization, but where is that energy funneling into? Right? Where does it? And the scary thing is when you start asking yourself this question in the context of American politics, you often find out the answer is the Democratic Party and voting, and then it ends, right? You often find out that, a lot of these organizations that are mobilizing aren't actually mobilizing for radical transformative change, right? They're not advocating for, democratization of our system. They're not advocating for liberation. They're advocating for slow reforms, and often the mobilization, all of that energy just kind of peters out in the end because it doesn't have a vehicle for which to continue past the end of the protest. And that's where organizing comes in, right? Organizing is actively working to change the minds of those who disagree with you or who are not engaged in your cause, right? There's obviously a lot of people who disagree with us, but when you think about third-party independent socialist organizing, the largest voting bloc in most elections is non-voters. It's people who aren't engaged in your cause. And mainstream politics will have you think that these people are lazy and apathetic. But the reality is they've been burned too many times, right? They refuse to continue participating in their own destruction, right? They have voted Democrat, or they've voted for, the person they thought would be the best representative for them out of the mainstream parties. And they've been stabbed in the back time and time again, right? They voted, their people won, and their life on the ground and the day-to-day life got worse. And so that, while we can obviously focus on changing people's mind, I would actually say this has been a failed strategy in the Green Party for decades. This idea that we can cleave off enough left Democrats to become a viable party. And the reality is the math just isn't there. You can't steal a minority of a minority party and reach a majority, right? That the math doesn't compute on that one. So if we're going to really build something, if we're going to build an alternative path to become an alternative power, that not engaged in the cause, demographic is really our bread and butter and where we should focus on.